I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Danny Coleman, the host of Rock On Radio. He's been the host of Rock On Radio for over 10 years, and I know his story consists of going from rags to riches and rags to riches again. I want to find out how hard it's been, how his work ethic has changed over time, and how grateful he is for the platform he has built for indie individual music artists, giving them a voice in an otherwise loud industry. Join me today in my conversation with Danny Coleman. I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Danny Coleman. Good evening, fine sir.
Hello, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest.
It's my pleasure. Are you quite the evening yet, or are you still in the afternoon?
We are in the late afternoon. It is 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
I was saying a moment ago, and I was a little shocked you weren't like in studio or in house or something, but you have some pretty beautiful weather to enjoy for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm outside in the backyard. My neighbors behind me are having a party out there. I can hear their music. It's beautiful weather for this time of year.
Danny, could you give, I just gave an introduction a moment ago to you. Could you give a little bit of what you're doing now, and then I'll take you back?
Okay, well, I'm a host of multiple radio programs, the longest being a show called Rock On Radio, which I've done for nearly 12 years now. I feature independent artists and in a 2-hour, what was live, but currently we're pre-recording it due to the COVID experience. I also host a weekly blues music show on a local college radio station. And I pull a weekend shift on an oldies station down in South New Jersey, where I live. I'm an entertainment journalist, a syndicated entertainment journalist, and a musician myself. And I also have a podcast. So I've been pretty busy.
You're a busy man. Danny, I'd like to get into a lot of what you just mentioned, but could you take us back? What was your very first job? I read a bio of you that said you've been working full-time since 18, but I'm thinking if you started working at 18, you may have had maybe even a part-time job before that. What was your first job, even if it brings you down into your younger teens?
My first job was I had a friend who delivered newspapers, a newspaper circulation route.
Very common. Yeah.
The two local papers here, one would come in the morning, one would come in the afternoon. Well, they both decided to add a weekend edition on Saturdays because for the longest time, there were no newspapers on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. They added Saturday delivery, and it was a morning publication. Well, he didn't want to get out of bed that early to deliver the paper on Saturdays, so I began doing his route on weekends. And then eventually, when he became of age to obtain drive a motor vehicle, I got the route because he was a few years ahead of me. And ironically enough, it's those monies that I saved to buy my first drum kit.
Nice.
So, yep, so I was 13, I guess.
How old were you? Sorry.
I was 13 when I took over the paper route.
13. So, I mean, besides doing it for a lazy friend who didn't want to get up on Saturday, why did you want that Saturday job? Were you already thinking of the drum kit?
Yeah, because I started to play the drums when I was 11 and a half. And at the age of 12, my cousin handed me Led Zeppelin 4, and it changed my life forever. And I said, I need to play the drums like that guy. So I needed to buy a drum kit. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to earn it. My parents aren't going to just give it to me. Of course, they helped, but I paid 90% of the money for that drum kit came out of my pocket.
At 13. Did you stick with the drums all the way through?
Yeah, I still play today.
As a musician, that's your instrument.
Drums and Latin percussion, yep.
And after your how long did you have that paper route that your friend eventually gave you?
I eventually gave it up when I got to be a sophomore in high school. My second year of high school, I gave it up because I was on the high school soccer team, or trying out for the high school soccer team,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in a band. I discovered rock and roll as a freshman, and everything kind of went downhill from there.
It's
But
well,
yeah.
it's funny to hear like rock and roll band and soccer player. I don't know, maybe that does cross over, but I mean, it could allow you to have longer hair, I guess. I'm not quite sure.
Well, you'll like this, Brian. I was a big fan of ice hockey as well. I used to play ice hockey too. So
It's I tried to play. My friends were good, but obviously being from Canada, but um I just never had the ability. I don't know, maybe because I was small, but I played soccer instead. So in high school, what are you thinking for career-wise? Or was rock and roll your band? Were you going to be the next something? How are you branching off in your mind?
well, in high school, for me, it was all about music. I was in the high school band. I was had my own rock and roll band. We were doing very well, uh, and I thought, I really would like to be a professional musician.
Danny, the idea, just before you go further about wanting to be a professional musician, how, because I'm not a musician, right? Just like not a hockey player, but I appreciate music. How were you able to weigh the idea of rock and roll and being in the high school band? I mean, unless you had a very kind and caring music teacher, you may or may not have been playing some rock and roll. So how were you able to say, okay, I can, for me, it would be like hot cross buns or something, but not in high school.
In the high school, there were two different bands in high school. There was the marching band and the concert band,
Mm-hmm.
of which, if you're in one, you're in the other. And at least in our high school, that's how it worked. And fortunately, we had a band director who actually, he just passed away last week,
Sorry to
but
hear that, right?
he was a very good individual about encouraging people to discover music of any genre, any style, any kind. And the band was separate from the my life out of school. It's kind of, you go to work, you punch a clock,
Mm-hmm.
8 hours later you're done. Then you got your other life at home. And for me, that's what it was. All of my buddies, of course, on the drum line, we were all rock and rollers. And we even created some street beats for the marching band involving Moby Dick by Led Zeppelin, off of Led Zeppelin 2,
Mm-hmm.
for the cadence for the band to walk on and off the field with. So it did kind of cross a little bit
Yeah.
here and there.
So as your idea for getting more professional or getting to music professionally, how did that start to take track, or how did you even maybe divulge from it?
Well, it was fun. Playing music. What's that song from Todd Rundgren? I don't want to work. I just want to bang on the drum all day.
I don't want
It, it, Correct. It was a lot more fun just to play music, and I had dreams of touring and seeing the world and playing in front of 20, 30,000 people, uh, and these are things that I wanted.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I also had parents who said, that's great to fall back on, but you need something you can count on.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up getting my first full-time job at the age of 18, as opposed to going to college. Music paid, but it wasn't paying enough to pay the bills, so to speak.
Was that
So,
a hard decision for you to not to go to college? Was that something your parents were hoping that you would have tried? How did you make that decision?
you know, my there were 521 kids in my graduating class. My class rank was 80. So I was in the top, what, 20%, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that comes down to, of my class. Uh, but by the time I got out of high school, I had just had enough. I enjoyed playing music too much. I did apply to one college 3 different times, and all 3 times I never heard back. So I got discouraged.
Yeah. What were you
And
applying for?
I was applying to a college in upstate New York called Paul Smith's University. It was in upstate New York here in the United States. And they were famous for 2 things: hotel restaurant management and outdoor education.
Okay.
And I was going to go to school for outdoor education, to be like a park ranger or a
Yeah.
forest ranger or an educator. And uh, I never heard back. Never heard. I even had a friend that went there and gave her an application, said, "Here, take this, drop
Mm-hmm.
it off at
Mm-hmm.
admissions." So I know it got there. Nothing. And I got discouraged, and went to work the same day everybody else in this area went back to school. I went to work full time.
So
September 9th. Go
is
ahead.
this Wall Street Journal you went to?
Yes, September 9th, 1981, I started working full time
And what were you
for Dow
doing?
Jones and Company. Well, for there, at first I started just in the mailroom,
How did
and
how
then
did you get that job? Now, off the heels of being discouraged, right? Wanting you had visions of grandeur for music. You're still doing it on the side. You applied to a university and you didn't get it. So you had the wherewithal to go get a job, but how was that process? Do you recall of, I have to put a resume, or did you know someone? How did that work?
well, I knew someone, uh, a girlfriend of mine. Her sister already worked there,
Mm-hmm.
and she had heard of an opening and said, "You should go apply." So I went and I applied, and I got the job. And I stayed in the mailroom for about a year. And then I moved up into the engineering division where I manufactured computer software.
Did you, I mean, that's a big step, right? I mean,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
even just saying it for me is difficult. Did you see a pathway with the Wall Street Journal? Did you see something that you maybe would have wanted to pursue?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a writer, so I understand that they had an entire editorial division, and they
Mm-hmm.
had an entire. I mean, it was the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
They used to print. One of the printing plants was right where I worked. They used to print for pretty much most of the Northeast area, right out of our building. Uh, so it was very interesting. It was very intriguing, and I thought, well, this is a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the computer software thing came along, and a chance to kind of be a supervisor in my own department. And with that came a little more cash. And I just kind of got stuck there. And then I met a girl, and who would go on to become my then wife. And I thought, well, I can't raise a family on what I'm making here. So
Mm-hmm.
I got an opportunity. I had an opportunity to switch jobs, and so I did.
It's interesting. I don't know if you can comment on it, but being, a guy growing up, high school, not sure what I want to do, have some ideas, and then you get married and some switch, not all guys, but a switch goes on, like, I have some responsibilities. And it's
Right.
not the same frame of thinking that you had a few years ago when it was just you or I supporting, or, giving some money in our pocket.
Oh yeah. Well, now that well, I was always raised to do the right thing, be responsible, because I'll never forget when I didn't go to college. My mom said to me, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, you need to get a job." I said, "I have a job. I'm a musician." And she said, "No, you need to get a real job. That's good to fall back on." So I'm living in their house because I just got out of high school,
Yeah.
and so I kind of, to get a job, I accommodated their wishes by getting a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got the job, when I left Dow Jones, I accommodated my then wife, because we were going to try and start a family a few years down the road, and I needed something a little more stable.
Sorry, you
So there's
mentioned Dow Jones. What's the connection? I'm ignorant. Dow Jones to Wall Street Journal.
Dow Jones and Company were the owners of the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
They're still the owners, but I think Rupert Murdoch bought them out several years ago.
He owns a few things, I hear.
Yeah, I think.
He's doing not too badly for himself. So when did the transition, or was it a straight transition when you met the girl who would become your wife at the time into UPS? Was that the next step that you made, or did you do something else? Yes.
That was August of 1989. I became a driver for United Parcel Service, where I was until January of 2009, when I woke up and had a very bad feeling in my back and never made it to work that day because I collapsed in my driveway.
Oh, no. My brother works for UPS now, and hopefully that doesn't happen to him.
I hope not.
was there something in particular that happened, or was it 20 years of grinding it out?
20 years, I'd never been hurt, never been injured, but 20 years of, as you just said, grinding things out, up and down steps, pushing, pulling, lifting, bending, twisting, pivoting, turning. Every day was an aerobic workout. I would walk as much as 7 miles a day sometimes, to 7 to sometimes 9 miles a day. And I woke up, the reason why I never made it to work is I collapsed in my driveway with 4 herniated discs, blood in my spine. One of the discs leaked. I never knew it. Just one day, just boom, like that. And that began a very bad downward spiral for me at that point.
Well, I know I read in a bio about you that you went from rags to riches and back from to rags to riches again. Is this in this time frame of this? I mean, near 20 years, you were nearing retirement age anyway, or at least the ability to retire. So you're at the height of, your career. So can you comment on the difficulty of that process of, living through your life and then things shattering where you're not going to make any money unless, there's some sort of payout. But even then, it's usually not as much as you require.
Well, in 2004, so 16 years ago, I left my now ex-wife, and I had 2 small children at the time. There were things going on that I just couldn't take anymore, so I left.
Yeah.
And it took approximately 3 years of bitter negotiating and fighting, and because I was the only one who was employed, and my ex-wife was a stay-at-home parent. And unfortunately, the laws here in the United States, specifically in New Jersey, are not very male-friendly. So I really had to fight just so that I could bring home more of my paycheck than she did. So in that case, it took 3 years. So my divorce was not finalized until 2007. And in
It's a hard, long
2009,
battle.
yeah, and in 2009, my back gave out, which caused 3 years of unemployment. I was 46 years old at the time, and my back gave out. I was suffering from what they termed ageism, because nobody wanted to hire a 46-year-old guy with a bad back.
Yeah.
So I had 3 years of unemployment, and during those 3 years, I managed to essentially make what little bit of savings I had. I had less than $100,000 in the bank, and I spread it out over 3.5 years so I could live. But I also accrued debt, and at one point, I was down to, between my savings and my checking, $17.
People could pass over it and say, but the idea of having $100,000 and that's it, no other income, and you can just see it drop, right? Nowadays, $100,000 isn't what it used to be, and that will drop very quickly. So someone could hear, oh, he had $100,000, he's all right. No, not after a few years, you're not. and then you're down to
Well,
$17.
yeah, spread that out over 3 years. That's $33,300 a year. I had child support to pay. I had alimony to pay, which eventually went away because my employment situation changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were pretty big money because they were based on my salary at UPS. So,
Mm-hmm.
which was great money and great benefits, but it took a toll on your body and your family life. So, yeah, $33,300 over 3.5 years. If anybody out there is listening can live on that,
It's
you
tough.
know, you can. Obviously, I've done it, but things start to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and it works on your psyche, and it works. I mean, I still had my children at that time were 14 and 11,
Mm-hmm.
so I still had a lot of living to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of their demands as well start to increase as they get into higher teenage years, thinking of college or something. And then I could only imagine, and I'm in that situation now, just thinking, oh, well, Dad, I'd like to go to college. And, a good answer, I think, is, well, start working. But from the heart, you're like, oh, I'd like to give it to you. I'd like to pay for that. I'd like to do that. And then you're looking, the $17 is not going to stretch it.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I mean, I was near homeless. I was literally near homeless. My parents are still alive, but they live 500 miles south of me and down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Mm.
Um, and fortunately for me, a friend heard of my plight through another friend, and he took me in and let me live there for a couple of years till I was almost back up on my feet. And then his situation changed, and I now live with another friend of mine. So uh, it's uh, it's very, and I'm almost there.
Yeah.
I'm almost there, but I've been scratching and clawing for 16 years trying to put my life back together, and I'm getting there. I
Well,
mean, I had to reinvent myself on top of it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about Rock On Radio, because this is when you started to reinvent, did you not? When you answered an ad, was it 10 years ago or 11 years ago now?
Yeah, it was March of 2009, and a couple months after I hurt my back, and on the advice of an attorney who said your days at UPS are done. They're not going to hire you, or they're not going to keep you on the payroll. Uh, he said, I'd try, you need to find another job. And I tried looking at other jobs, but as I said, nobody wanted to hire me.
Mm-hmm.
The state of New Jersey, where I live, provided me with a jobs coach who wrote a resume and reached out to people, but nothing. And so I thought, well, I went to broadcasting school a year after I got out of high school. I took a year off and went to broadcasting
Mm-hmm.
school, and I got out. It was a year program, and I got a certificate and an FCC communications license. And I said, just okay, let me see what happens. I never got a job in radio back then, though, because I was making more money at Dow Jones for the
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street Journal, and I
Mm-hmm.
had bills to pay. So I thought, well, now's as good a time as ever. And this time I'm doing what I want for me. I'm not going to accommodate my parents. I'm not going to
Yeah.
accommodate my ex-wife. I'm not going to accommodate my girlfriend. I'm doing this for me. So I saw the ad on Craigslist, of all places, what I wanted to do. The radio shows wanted, hosts wanted, program ideas wanted. I called the number, set up a meeting, and I went down there, pitched my idea for Rock on Radio, and they bought it. And April 9th, 2000, or April 26th, 2009, Rock on Radio was launched.
This is, I mean, knowing that you were in music from a kid, how was your music coming along throughout this time, even through the struggles with UPS? Were you still playing even maybe some gigs or something, or just practicing when you felt like it? How was music coming along before you answered that ad?
Well, one of the funny things is and you said it earlier, once I got married and had children, my drum kit got taken down and put in a corner with a sheet over top of it for about 10 years. And then I wanted to buy my ex-wife a convertible for her 40th birthday. So I thought, well, I need some extra cash for this that she really won't see, and my paycheck or whatever, mattress money. So I started doing the Latin percussion and started picking up work with acoustic gigs and acoustic acts, duos and trios, and I just started socking the money away so I could buy her the car. But that was about it. Then I started picking up more work with the Latin percussion than I did with a full drum kit, because a lot of places were switching to the smaller acts. They weren't having a 5, 6, 7-piece electric bands. They were going to 2- and 3-piece acoustic guitar type of things, piano and a guitar. So I would pick up a lot of work that way. But just like everything else, it ebbs and flows, Sometimes you got a lot of work, sometimes you don't. Right now I'm in a down cycle. I really don't have much.
So thinking about the step, I think it took some courage. So knowing that the music wasn't vibrant, or there wasn't a lot coming from it, you had some difficulties. And just thinking of my listeners, the step that you took to reach out to this radio station, it's kind of a dream that you had, taking journalism and the idea of being in music. How nervous were you to answer this ad, or was it maybe out of desperation? How did you feel about doing this and going to the studio or the radio station and then presenting yourself?
Well, it was an AM radio station, and it used to be a gospel radio station that had just switched over its programming. So they were kind of hungry for ideas. And when I went down there, I thought, because when I was 15, I had gone into the recording studio for the first time with that very same band I spoke of that I was in high school with. And I remember hearing my band on the radio because we were in some contest, which is why we went into the studio to get a good recording of our material. And I remember the chills that I got from head to toe. Think, wow, I'm on the radio. and being a musician, I said to myself, if I can give other musicians that platform and that same feeling, I'm going to do it. So that's how I cultivated the idea and curated Rock on Radio, and they were on radio. I mean, it was AM. It was an AM signal, but it was terrestrial radio. So that's how it started.
So what is it now, Danny, that you do? I have some questions about that radio station as well, but what is it you do now? You said it's kind of a little bit of a downturn, but what takes up your day in the work that you do, or that you're trying to produce weekly or whenever you have an episode?
Well, Rock on Radio, up until COVID struck, was a live program. 3 years after I started on the AM radio station, I realized that nobody was listening to me on AM radio. They were listening to me on their computers. So we had a mutual parting of the ways, and I took it to my very first affiliate was a station called Hamilton Radio. They were an internet radio station, and they were starting to carry live shows. So I went strictly internet broadcasting in 2012. And from there, I amassed multiple other affiliates, and I jumped around a couple bit. There were reasons why various stations. Oh,
you got muted there, Danny.
They couldn't afford this. They couldn't afford that. Then when BMI and ASCAP raised their fees for the music, and it shut a lot of internet stations down, or made them rethink their programming. So I lost a few affiliates, but again, I bounced back. And now I've got 8 affiliates that are really solid in my corner.
So can you explain, I'm ignorant to it, but the idea of having an affiliate or being syndicated, what does that mean to the simple mind like myself?
Well, what happens is my show, as I was saying, I'm sorry, I got off in a different direction. I
Yeah.
used to air it live on Sunday nights.
Yep.
Now I have to pre-record it because we're limited to the amount of people we can have in studio
Mm-hmm.
due to the pandemic. So I pre-record it, and at the end of the night, my engineer edits it, checks the levels, does all the things that he does so that it sounds like a cohesive, smooth radio show. And then we air it on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern time here in the U.S. But what I do is I send those files out. I send them out to 8 other radio stations, internet radio stations, and they rebroadcast the program. Or some of them log in and they air it at the same time that I'm on the air. They just cut into our stream and they air it live on their station as well. So, or recorded in this case as well. So, yeah, and I've got stations in New York, Florida, Kansas City, over in the UK, in
Mm-hmm.
Yorkshire. Trying to think of where else I have.
Well, I listened to it earlier, and so out in South Korea too.
Okay, in Korea too. There you go.
So are you getting yourself involved with the editing process or just strictly behind the mic? How much are you involved in the whole process?
Well, with Rock on Radio, everything is me from start to finish. I'm the creator, I'm the host. My engineer does all the technical stuff, but I have a producer. My engineer is a gentleman by the name of Art Ackerman, but I have a producer named Claire Henwood who is literally a godsend. I mean, this woman, she just amazes me, the little things that she does and picks up on. And she handles she's helped me now handling a lot of the marketing and the social media. She runs my website. Not to mention keeps me on my toes, which isn't always an easy thing to do.
What, Danny, is difficult about what you do, especially since you do so much for the show? What is something that's hard to do? And it might even be, I mean, some of the things that she's taking up for you, but what do you find that's hard?
The hardest thing, there's two things that are a little on the difficult side. Booking, once you book a guest, musicians can be narcissistic and flighty at times, so to speak. So once you book a guest, A, getting them to honor that commitment, and B, getting them to advertise on the program. They're terrible at promotion. I mean, I know I'm one of them. I'm a musician, so I try not to make those mistakes. Like with this podcast, when you tell me it's going to air, I'm going to promote the daylights out of it for you, for you, for me. I've had musicians come in and say, "Oh yeah, I should probably let people know I'm on the air," and that's literally 15 minutes before we go live. So, what good is that doing? So that's the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
I don't have trouble getting guests. There's always people willing to come on and talk, especially for 2 hours. But getting them to promote themselves and remember that they're supposed to come on the program, that can be trying sometimes.
It's interesting. I'm not looking so much for average. I mean, I always hope that it happens, but I understand just with my limited experience, and there's no limit to guests. I can attest to that as well. There's lots of people that, mine is a little different. It's not music specific, but people willing to promote or talk. And I'm asking people too, just like asking you, just to talk about work. But I can sense when you message you, as you said about honor, you and I, we connected really quick. We're like, okay, we're going to set this up. Boom, it's done. And I really like that. But you can tell when some people are like, well, I don't, and this is like in a message, like, well, I don't know, maybe this day. No, that's not going to work for me. No, that's not going to work for me. I'm like, are we gonna just try to to work together? And like, come on, we can do this. But those are some real struggles and real difficulties, and I can imagine, especially if someone, they want to be promoted and they're not doing their end, that would be frustrating as well.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, I want to spread the word about my radio program so that people will listen, so that I can give these people who don't want to promote themselves exposure. It's a very it's a catch-22. You got to help each other, because in this business, especially now,
Mm-hmm.
where there's such limited ability to perform or to make your presence known, it's you need all the help you can get, you know.
I was going to ask about what satisfaction you get, but I also had another question which I think can tie into it. In thinking back over 10 years of answering that ad and giving these indie artists, which I didn't even know what indie meant, but it's just individual artists. For all of these years, I thought indie, like, what kind of music is indie music? But it's individual artists and recording producers. Is how grateful are you, and looking back at not the struggles, but just giving people a platform to show their music? So maybe some of the satisfaction you get out of that.
Oh, it's incredibly satisfying. Uh, indie, individual, yes, individual, also independent. They are independent from the big record labels. Because so many times they get signed by big record labels, then the record labels try to mold them into something
Mm-hmm.
totally different than what they are, which never made sense to me. So if they do it themselves, there's a lot of DIY, a lot of do-it-yourself things that go on,
Mm-hmm.
especially with indie artists who aren't beholden to the record companies. So it gives me huge amounts of satisfaction to sit in studio and see some of the people that I've had go on to bigger things,
Mm-hmm.
or to sign or get a single that's going up the charts or Grammy nominated, especially with some of the younger artists. I've had artists come to me, um, they were 14. That was almost 12 years ago. Now they're adults.
Mm.
And to see how they've progressed with their music and really stuck with it, it's very gratifying to know that I had a hand in helping them out with
Speaking of gratifying and what you can perceive, is there anything that you know that you would like other people to know? Maybe having a radio show, podcast, or just you yourself, that if they knew this, they would appreciate your line of work a little bit better? Is there anything that you can let people, some insight into some things that you know, just to help us appreciate you better?
it. Well, my radio show, Rock on Radio, uh, any income I get from advertisers, I give 100% of that income to the City of Angels, which is the station that I broadcast from, coaradio.com. I give that to City of Angels. It's City of Angels Recovery Radio. And what they do is the City of Angels organization, which is cityofangelsnj.org, they get people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, they get them into treatment. They provide safe havens, they provide support to the families, they stay with you from start to finish, and they're a total 100% volunteer organization. So any monies I get that come in through advertisers, I donate right back to the City of Angels.
It's
And
interesting. Go ahead.
well, and what that does is, I mean, anybody can be an advertiser on my program on
Mm-hmm.
Rock on Radio, because uh, all they have to do is donate. I don't care if it's $1. Donate to the City of Angels, and I'll make them a sponsor of my show for 30 days. So, I try to give back in that way, and I try to give musicians a chance to be heard. I don't script or rehearse my program. I don't come out with, I don't have a list of questions that I like to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I essentially realize that people will tell you so much more about themselves if you give them the time to do so.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you're doing now, letting me talk, and
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Thank you.
No, I appreciate. I do have a list of questions, but I do try to meander through them. But when I'm listening to your program, I heard the commercials that were with City of Angels, and I was like, I even thought to myself, not knowing what you just said, is these are good commercials, and I want to listen to them because they're talking about people who had these problems and that, they were helped by City of Angels. And I was like, these are real. I was just thinking like, wow, I would like to have these types of commercials because people will listen to these opposed to, come down here and buy this for $1.99.
That's true. No, that's true. Again, it's an organization that helps people. Testimonies and testimonials and things of that nature.
Yeah.
You can go to cityofangelsnj.org and see all the testimonials. You can go to my website, which is Danny Coleman's Rockonradio.com, where the quick link is DCROR.com. And you can see testimonials and things about my program, or you can see the setup and all that stuff that we use at the City of Angels.
Danny, knowing that some of the struggles that you've gone through and how it's not easy, how are you able to take your feet off the bed, put them on the floor, and stay productive and keep grinding it out?
That's a great question, because when I was at the lowest point of low in my life, you struggle with a lot of things. This isn't supposed to happen to me. This happens to other people.
Mm-hmm.
You only hear about this. Why is this happening to me? There is a chapel that I stop in every day for 5 minutes and just sit down and pray. And when I was literally, and I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form, 3 days from being homeless, I just went in. I said, well, it's up to you, big guy. I'm out of it. I'm out of ideas here. If it's you, I'm done. I can't do it. I had friends that would say to me, if I had your life, I'd either be suicidal or in rehab, because I literally lost everything. I lost everything during the divorce. I lost what wasn't taken from me. I lost when I hurt my back.
Yeah.
And I literally had to start over from the ground up. And fortunately, I had support from a lot of good friends and some family. But I really had to look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what? You're responsible for this. These are decisions that you made. Now start making the right ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, because I'm on my way back. I'm getting there.
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
there yet.
it's
I'm
good to
getting
hear.
there.
And I think you would be the first to acknowledge everyone has difficulties in their lives and they come in different ways. And sometimes it seems like some people get hit harder than others. And it's a struggle, but it's good that you're optimistic about keeping going and seeing that things are getting a little bit better. And I like to hear that, because listeners, right now, there's difficulties, whether they're ill, right? It may not be a back problem, but some sort of other problem. They lose someone in their life. And it happens a lot. And people need to hear that other people are going through some difficult times, losing everything, even mobility, and still striving forward and staying productive. That is great, Danny.
I had so much stacked against me. I don't derive a big income flow from the radio show that I do. I don't derive a big income from the blues radio show that I do. So anything I get, though, I now use wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. I'm not afraid to take the risks that at one time I go, oh, no, that's too too risky. Um, I make the decisions now based on what's good for me and what's not good for somebody else, or what's good for somebody else. It's I'm not selfish. I'm just not accommodating others' needs before mine anymore. And not 24/7, of course. I'm not a jerk, but sometimes you got to put number one first, and that's
Hmm.
you. And in order to do that, you've got to make yourself a priority sometimes.
Are you able to solely support yourself off the radio, or do you also work doing other things on the side?
I also have a day job
Okay,
that I
that's
had
good.
to take because unfortunately I take medication for blood pressure. So I needed to obtain a day job.
But that's, I mean, for my show, I think that's great. I mean, I was talking to an NHL referee yesterday who just happened to be from my hometown. And as he was pursuing his career or his dream to do this particular thing, to be an NHL referee, he was laying concrete, he was working in a hospital, he was doing all these other jobs all the way through. And even now, he does some work in the summertime, just when he's on the off season. So it's good to hear that people, and for listeners, just the idea of even when you're pursuing something and it's the thing that you really want to do, bill those bills don't really go away and they need to be paid. So just stay responsible.
Yep. Yeah, no, I work a day job in a hospital, actually. So, yeah. Uh, and I do it, but I find that more and more of my time is being consumed by what happens when I get home.
Hmm.
My writing. I
Yeah.
do interviews and I have to write, and the radio shows and the music,
Danny,
the stuff I'd
speaking
rather
of,
be doing.
yeah, but that's what you're taking up more time. It's because this is what you want to do, right? It's
Right.
the
Yep.
passion you have. Speaking of
Yeah.
writing, is there any tool that you use that helps you stay efficient in your work? It could be the hospital job, but in the dream that you're aspiring uh, to have a successful radio program or podcast program, is there a specific tool that you use to help you stay efficient?
Yeah. My producer, Claire.
That's good. No one ever told me a person yet. I've gotten out like my tongue and my brain and my phone, and no one said another person, which is good.
No, she keeps me on the straight and narrow. Her mind works in ways that mine never did. My strengths lie in interviewing
Hmm.
and the ability to be willing to take a back seat, which is ironic. Being a drummer, I was always in the back anyway. I guess I got used to it.
Hmm.
But uh, the ability to let other people talk. One of my greatest accomplishments is when I'm done with an interview and the person on the other end says, "Wow, that's it? That's the interview? This was like
Hmm.
we were just chit-chatting.
Yeah.
You made me feel really comfortable. Thank
Yeah.
you."
Yeah.
For me, that's what it's all about.
And that probably means a lot to those indie artists in particular, as they're
Right.
new at this, right? And
Yeah,
having the
some of them.
comfort and allowing them to gain the confidence as they progress in their career as well.
Yep. Actually, yeah. No, you're true. That's true. But fortunately, in the position I'm in, I'm also able to talk with a lot of rock stars,
Hmm.
classic rockers
Yeah.
from the 70s, 80s, and
Yeah.
90s, even some of them older. Um, th- that that comment in particular, I've heard from many, many, many of them, but the one of them came from Rick Wakeman, who was the keyboardist for Yes, and Rick said to me, he's like, as only he can. Oh, this was an interview? No, this was like I was having a pint with my mates.
Well, the
So
thing too is, especially more seasoned musicians or people in the industry, they receive many of the questions over and over and over again. And you can
right.
see it on some of their faces when they're being interviewed. Like it's already, they already have the answer. Oh yeah, I know this answer, and that's kind of, that would be draining.
Yep. Matter of fact, I did an interview like that just yesterday. with a band called Aliens Don't Ring Doorbells. And I said to the guy, I said, look, this is going to be the only contrived question I ask you. What's with the name? I'm sure you get that all the time. And they started laughing. They said, yeah, we do. But after that, they were quite happy. They said, good questions that you ask, because people don't normally ask us that, let alone let us answer. So, yeah, it can be. Yeah, I'm sure they hear the same things over and over and over.
Well, it's good that you acknowledge that your producer is your greatest asset, because it is the first time I heard someone mention a person. Danny, do you have a top tip, thinking of indie artists? It doesn't have to be with music, but people getting into work, thinking of you, first starting your paper route, getting into the mail room, working your way up, and then UPS, changing of career type people. Do you have a tip for people getting into work wherever they are in their journey?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't do something because it's not the what your parents would do, or your girlfriend or boyfriend or would want you to do. It's your life living. Do what you need to do to make you happy, and if you're happy, you'll have no problem making other people happy.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid, and what I've appreciated by doing this show is a lot of people that I talk to they lean more towards taking that risk, taking that jump. If you have a desire, a talent, a dream, don't live with regrets, to pursue it. And I mean, you did that by answering an ad, right? You wouldn't be where you are 10 years, however much, you're there where you want to be. 10 years ago, you started something. And I was thinking of this today is, with this podcast, just not, a few months, is, where will it be in 10 years? And then if I said, the idea of getting behind a microphone, or someone strapping on some skates, or singing, writing a song, just start that thing that you want, take that risk, even if it means doing another job on the side.
And the only answer I would have for you there, Brian, is it will be exactly where you want it to be. Because if you want it to be here interviewing me in my backyard for the next 10 years, and that's what you want for it, then that's great. If you want it to attain higher levels and more listenership and attain, greatness, then you'll find ways to make that happen too. I've had to do it. I've built my show through grassroots. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. Trust me.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you can hear your neighbors having a party next door. I like sitting here on your stoop with you, right? I find, not to get on me, is the idea of only interviewing people who are, can get you somewhere. That's for why we work. I don't think that would touch on the largest segment of the population, is to get people who don't want to be interviewed and just, I've never been on a camera before. Come on, you can do it. You can do it, because this is the people who work. These are the people we meet every day. And as long as this type of show goes on, these are the type of people I want, people who go through struggles, through people who have gone through adversity. So there's no grander aspirations, except that I hope it does well and people listen. But the idea of getting to the heart of people who work is really what I want to do.
And good for you. And I appreciate you, letting me tell my story, because again, I was ready to give up. I mean, I never turned to drugs. I never turned to alcohol. I never thought about, suicide. That's all. To me, that doesn't make it any better. That just makes it a whole lot worse. But what I did, though, was I didn't hide from my mirror. I looked in my mirror and I said, you got to get it together, dude. Nobody's going to help you here. Nobody's just going to give you a job. Nobody's just going to make you rich and famous. Nobody's going to say, hey, you want to tour with this band? Nobody. I had to do it myself. I had to pick myself up and do it myself. And that's one of the things you touched on it earlier, that's how I raised my children, who are now 28 and 25. I said, you know what, guys, there's three things. I love you enough to let you hate me. I love you enough to let you fail. And I love you enough to give you a hand up, not a hand out. And to that, I also said to them, I'd rather live with 1,000,000 failures instead of one regret. And then I kind of kicked them out the door, said, you're on your own.
Yeah,
I just had breakfast with them this morning, actually. But
yeah, they're kicked out, but they can come back. Yeah.
Yeah, they can come back.
Well, yeah, I've been kicked out a number of times. Speaking of your life and your family, how do you differentiate or turn off the music or turn off the work life and live your life? And how do you make those work life choices?
You know, having that day job really stinks. It eats into the things that I really enjoy doing, the radio, the writing, so it really, think about it, it's an 8-hour or longer job, so it takes up a third of my day. But the time that I do have, I always try to make time for my kids. Even if it's, hey, you know what are you doing? I'm going to stop by for 15 minutes. Or are you in the neighborhood? Sure, I'll throw something on the grill. Come on by, we'll have some dinner. When they ask me, I never tell them I'm too busy. It's all about prioritizing the things that are important.
It's important, very important, and it's tough. And I was talking to someone the other day. I know it will happen, but the idea of our children not talking to us, not intentionally, but just because their lives start to pick up, or they get married and their job in 1 week turns into 2 weeks. And and the person I was speaking to is like, yeah, and it could be longer, like months. And it happens, without talking. And I think we, just like exercise, we don't always like doing it, but once we get the shoes on, the shoes tied, and we get into it, it's not always our first priority, even when we say it is, to pick up the phone. Do we pick up the phone, or we turn on our cell phone nowadays, I guess, and call the child, and hopefully they in turn will call us. But just hopefully, to take that moment and say, I was just thinking of you. It doesn't have to be this big philosophical conversation, and it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but just those little, because before we know it, those little moments are gone.
That they are, and literally snap of the fingers, they're gone. I mean, my daughter's birthday was just last week, and I see these pictures of her that I have in my files on my computer, and I said, God, where is that little girl?
Little girl, yeah.
Yep. My son too. I see these pictures of him, or him and her together, and it's like, where did that? I mean, yeah, it's 20 years like that. It does, in a blink of an eye.
Danny, just thinking of blink of an eye, is there any mistakes? And you don't have to divulge the mistakes, but any mistakes or things that you wish you would have known years ago that you can impart on us today? Whether it's a mistake you learned from, something you didn't know, and there's a lesson in it.
Oh yeah. The same thing. I mean, how much time do you have, Brian?
I got some. I think your son is leaving. The SUN. Can I spell it? Behind you is leaving. I don't know how much time you have, but I have all day.
Well, what I will do is I will fix that issue. Fortunately, I paid the bill here, so I will fix that issue right in a second for you.
So the idea of a mistake or something that you learned along the way that you can impart to us.
Well, number one is, again, you got to be yourself. You have to turn around and be true to yourself, be genuine. I know it sounds cliche. There we go. I didn't mean to stick my face in the camera there. I know it sounds cliche, but it really is. If you do what you want to do. And again, it goes back to what I said. You don't want to constantly accommodate others, because all that does is make other people happy and you feeling unfulfilled. There's got to be a balance. And for the majority of my life, I never balanced. I always gave in to make other people happy. And I can't stress, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is sometimes you have to do things differently. As far as like money or finances, no, you know what? It is what it is. You're gonna. I just want to be able to. I regret getting that job when I was 18. I should have just said, you know what? I'm going to be a musician. And if I butted heads with my parents, I should have moved out. But I did. Again, I accommodated, did the right thing. Then I got married, and my job at UPS gave me everything I had. Now my ex-wife has, but everything I had, and that's how it worked. But sure, there were tons of mistakes I made. Maybe I was too lenient in a lot of places. Maybe I didn't go after something hard enough, like I said I wanted to. But again, you live and learn. I think I'm in a spot I'm supposed to be in. I think all my troubles and tribulations and near homelessness and lack of money, I think they all serve their purpose so that you appreciate the things that you do have.
Thinking of maybe some of the people you interview, and not a knock against them, but even your own temptation and knowing my own of thinking of career and character. So we come across people a lot who put their career first, and they might be a little concerned with their character, but first is their career. Can you comment on how a slippery slope that might be versus putting your career first and putting your character first and allowing your career to follow along?
Yeah. I
can only imagine some of the musicians and I'm, paraphrasing, or I'm a musician, walk in with their guitar in their hand and
there's, fortunately for me, I've been doing interviews with, A-listers and B-listers, so to speak, since 2010, when I started writing for the local newspaper. Of course, Rock on Radio was 2009, and they were more of the indie artists who were trying to make it. So they had a much different outlook than those who had already established themselves. And I've only had two people I can say honestly were jerks.
Okay.
Two people.
Well, that's encouraging. For 10 years, that's encouraging.
I mean, of course you do deal with some musicians when you're out in clubs and things that are just like, I'm me. Look at me. Look how great I am. As I said, musicians tend to be narcissists. It's all about them. But for the most part, I can't really say that I've encountered that. But as a person individually, I realized that because I've been on radio programs where the host thought that he was the focus and not the guest, where he didn't like to be questioned, or he didn't like the answer, or back and forth, and they think that they're the personality. Yeah, you're a radio personality, but why'd you invite me on if all you're going to do is talk about yourself?
Yeah,
exactly. Good term for it. So I think that character is always far more important than career. I could have a great career, and I've had a great career hosting this radio show. But if people hear the name Danny Coleman and then they associate it with, his show gets out to a lot of people, but he's a jerk. What good is it? I've met so many friends, or made so many friends, picked up gigs with some of my guests as a musician. I've been lauded, I've been respected, I've been welcomed, I've been helped when I was down,
Mm-hmm.
all because I took the time to be
To
a
put your
man of
character,
character
to put your
instead of
character first. Yeah.
putting my career first. Yeah.
It's,
And whether or not they like me is a whole nother story. I don't know, but
do you get to play with a few musicians? You said you did. Like, does that happen often where you get to play a little bit with someone, maybe someone you might have idolized, or do you get that opportunity, or is that a rare occasion?
well, I mean, it's a rare occasion, but it's happened about a half a dozen times over the last 10 years. Uh, I've shared a stage with a guitar player by the name of Gary Hoey.
Mm-hmm.
I got up at the end of his set. He pulled me up. I played drums for him for a couple songs. That was at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Uh, and Ed Rowland of the band Collective Soul.
Mm-hmm.
I got to play Latin percussion for his. He has a side project called the Sweet Tea Project, and they were doing a gig, and he asked me if I wanted to play some songs on Latin percussion, and I did. Al Stewart, the guy who did the song Year of the Cat and Time Passages and all that. So I did a few songs with Al Stewart at a local gig here in my area. I shared the stage with the guys from the band Living Color, Gary U.S. Bonds, Sarah Dash from Patti LaBelle's band. Gosh, who else? The list goes on, but sometimes I got to pinch myself during those moments because it's like, wow, these are people I idolize. Now I get to actually jam with them. It's great. Yeah. I feel like a little kid.
I, I, I wish I could play. I have a guitar sitting in front of me, sitting in a small little mobile closet, gently weeping.
Ah,
And even it would weep more if I was actually to play it. So um, I wish I played instruments. And speaking of education, thinking of, and it doesn't have to be formal, informal, just thinking of learning to play the drums, learning to, get behind a microphone, the learning process in UPS. Where do you value education for listeners, and how important is it, versus I don't know, yourself in high school? It's like, we don't need no education. Maybe, some people have that attitude, right? We don't. How do you value education, however it comes?
Again, it's going to sound cliche, Brian, but every day is a learning experience. I just spoke with a gentleman who calls my radio show every Sunday night, gentleman by the name of Dave. We call him Dave the Rave. He has a podcast also on COA radio called the Monday Night Morning Show. And Dave will call me every now and then, and he'll say, what do you think? Yesterday, it was something simple about getting permission to use a photograph. I said, of course, you always got to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's public domain or not, you should just reach out to know that they respect you. And he did, and he messaged me back, and he said, thanks, man, that was a great tip. He was blown away that I would actually reach out and take the time.
Mm-hmm.
I said, see, you learned something.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you learn things like that, believe me, over the since 2002 until about, well, I'm still going through it, but 2002 till last year, I'd say, the end of 2019, my life was full of way more negatives than it was positives. So I started looking at all the positives within them negatives.
Yeah.
And I learned something. I learned how to do maybe something different,
Yeah.
or who not to ask, or ask. I learned the ins and outs. I learned some new computer software like Adobe Audition so I could put my blues show together. There have been a lot of things that I've taken. You can always take, I don't care what it is, you can always take a positive from a negative.
Mm-hmm.
I always joke that I put the fun in funeral. You can laugh, you can find humor in everything.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other saying? I'm the funniest person I know. I laugh at myself every day. People, life's not that serious, man. Enjoy the ride while you can.
Yeah, it's true. And I say this, the idea of, if we were to list these bad things that are going on, which are horrible, right? We could never take away the bad things, but if we started to list at the same time the good things in our lives, especially as we reach out of our personal circle and reach out a little bit further, you're going to find the good things outweigh the bad, even though the bad are bad, right? The bad are bad, the bad are horrible. They kick us in the gut, they punch us in the face, but you'll find more things you have going right for you than you do going wrong.
Oh yeah, but sadly, along those lions, listen to me,
Well, some
lions.
people have lions in their lives too. So
Along those lines, uh, it's only human to remember the negative things that happen to you. But you're 100% correct, Brian. There could be 50 good things to happen to you today, but if one bad thing happens, that's what you're going to concentrate on.
yeah, that guy
Well, I was
cut
having a
me
good day,
off.
but yeah, yeah. It's up to us to change that mindset.
Speaking of mindset, do you have any advice thinking of people who have a lot of this list going on, the list of bad things going on? And it's not to diminish it, right? People lose people, and getting divorced and losing money and not having money and being homeless, and all those are horrible things. Do you have any words of encouragement for people that are feeling a little downtrodden, discouraged, whether it's because of this year or just, they can say, well, 2001 and 2002 or 1999 just keeps coming back to me, whatever it is, some words of encouragement for them?
Well, first of all, it's okay to be miserable. It really is. It's okay to be miserable, but don't feel sorry for yourself and don't give up. That's the thing. Do not give up, because as soon as you give up, you're done. You could literally be inches from that big break or that moment that you've been waiting for. And if you give up, you'll never know. Don't give up. Feel miserable, feel bad, get cranky, snap your neighbor's head off or your family's head off, apologize, realize that it's you're the one that's got the issue. Don't give up and move on. It all comes down to us, not anybody else. It's one of the problems with our society today, Brian, is we blame everybody else. Lawyers love it. The attorneys and the lawyers love it. Oh yeah, that's oh yeah, it's their fault that you hit them. What? Yeah, and the only people who make out from that is everybody but yourself. So
it reminds me a few weeks ago or a week ago, I was talking to Steve Lott, which was the watchdog for Mike Tyson, and he read a poem in the interview, which is an anonymous poem that Tyson's first manager, Cuss, read to him. And the idea is, by just what you're saying now, is don't give up. It's like, find the poem, if anyone's listening, of don't give up. You never know, that last, in a boxing metaphor, of that don't give up. One more punch could be that punch, right? It could be that one more thing, don't get back on your heels. And it's a beautiful poem, but it's the idea of, why would you give up? You're just so close. And as you said, you could be inches away from getting that thing that you want. And by giving up, there's lots of people that, let themselves flow down river. But don't give up. Keep trying. Keep your guard up, because people will try to pull you down. But you're not knocked out yet. So why not keep fighting?
Yeah, and believe me, in the business that I'm in, I've had more disappointments than I've had victories. But the victories outweigh those disappointments when they come along. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And it's only because I didn't give up.
Yeah.
I've achieved a lot of the goals that I've shot for. And I always feel that I am this close to finally getting what I need. And I never stop trying. And just don't give up. That's all I have to say.
Danny Coleman, how can people reach you, so, to listen to your program, to know that you're not one to give up? How can they get in contact with you?
Well, they can go to my website, dcror.com, www.rockonradio.com, which is the quick link for Danny Coleman's rockonradio.com.
Mm-hmm.
They can, and you can email me there through that site. It also has tabs to my blues radio show, which is called Danny Coleman's Got the Blues. That's on Monday evenings on a site called jazzon2.org. And you can email me at that station, danny@jazzon2.org. You can find me on Facebook under Danny Coleman's Rock on Radio 2, the number 2, or my personal page is Danny Coleman. Instagram and Twitter at Rock on Radio, or Coleman's Got for Danny Coleman's Got the Blues, but at Rock on Radio, Instagram and Twitter.
Danny, I don't know what I heard someone talk about the other day, blues, but can you give us a little insight into the blues? I mean, when you said like Danny Coleman got the blues, right? Like I'm like, oh, maybe you do. But the idea, the essence and the beauty in the blues.
Well, I had a blues band actually on excuse me, on Rock on Radio a couple of weeks ago. And the gentleman, his name was Wayne Kessler. Wayne says the complexity of the blues lies in its simplicity. And I thought about that for a second, and he's 100% right. Blues music is very simple. Now, I've had people say, oh, I don't like the blues. It's too depressing. It's too boring. Well, that's because they truly don't understand that there are multiple genres of the blues. There is the depressing blues. There's Delta blues. There's swing blues. There's jump blues. There's Chicago blues. There's St. Louis blues. There's various things. Every one of them are different. And they are simple. As far as a musician, there's a buddy of mine's a jazz guitarist, and he loves to recite the quote that blues musicians know 4 chords and play to thousands of people. Jazz players know thousands of chords and play to 4 people. And it's true. It's just all a matter of appreciation. Blues is dynamics. It's the words and the things that they sing are essentially kind of like the guy here from Jersey, Bruce Springsteen. You know, these people write a song telling you what they did today. and yet they put it in an art form that is just really amazing. As a drummer, I love playing the blues. It's my favorite genre to play. But it's a very misunderstood genre. All rock and roll is rooted in blues music. All those songs that Elvis and Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash, they were all old blues songs. And the stuff that they wrote was basically stolen from those old blues songs. So
I saw a video of, I think, B.B. King and Eric Clapton and a bunch of other guitarists on a stage, and they were just doing riffs, and it was just like it was like a mind trip, and one would go, the other would go, and they weren't singing at that, but it was, from my impression, blues or pretty soft rock. I don't know how you would describe it, but it seemed to me, especially with B.B. King, right? It was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, and all of those guys that you mentioned, Eric Clapton, Steve Winwood, the Count Stevie Ray Vaughan, countless blues players, the Tommy Castros, they all idolized B.B. King because he was widely considered, the father or son of the blues, or whatever you want to call it. He was the man that brought the genre into the forefront 60 years ago or more. And then the blues, though, they always bubble under the surface. Then you'll have a band like in the early 80s, the Fabulous Thunderbirds. They pop up and they start writing blues music like rock and roll, and then it becomes pop. And everybody's like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, well, they're a blues band. Then Stevie Ray Vaughan did it. Now you have the Gary Clarks and the Craze and these other artists who are they got new artists out today like Samantha Fish, Shamika Copeland, Anna Popovich. Look those names up. These are women who are setting the world of the blues on their ear,
Mm-hmm.
and their music is more commercialized, and it's just fantastic.
Well, Danny Coleman, you are in a very interesting industry, the music industry, and you have a wealth of knowledge about it, and I truly appreciate. I have one final question for you,
Okay, sir.
and that is, why do you work?
Because I have passion, Brian. I have a passion to follow my dream, a dream that I've had since I was probably 11 years old, when I first saw a drummer at a wedding, at my mother's cousin's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy gave me his sticks when he was done, because I was just amazed. And I said, at 11 and a half, I took my first drum lessons. At 12, I achieved a small drum kit. At 13, I bought my first real drum kit, or
Mm-hmm.
14, I was between 13 and 14 when I bought that drum kit I spoke of at the beginning of the program, which I still have to this day, actually. I still have it. It's a set of 76 Ludwig rockers. But if you have passion, follow it. I follow my passion. And even if I never am able to make the living that I want to make out of doing this, I know that I've touched a lot of different people and given them opportunities by having my radio programs. And that, my friend, is more fulfilling than anything I could ever dream of. But I follow my passion. And
Danny
I
Coleman,
suggest that everybody else does too.
it's great advice by Danny Coleman, the host of Rock On Radio. Keep it going, Danny. And I believe what you said is, music makes the world smaller. Live and love. And as always, rock on. Perfect.
Brian, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
You've been great. Talk to you later, Danny.
Okay, Brian. Take care.